founders of Admit Advantage, and we love Beat the GMAT. Today we're continuing our webinar series with the great folks at Beat the GMAT. And today I'm going to speak about sort of writing compelling essays, some tips and strategies and things you should think about. This is obviously a timely topic for a lot of you because you are catapulting towards the September, October round one deadlines. Hopefully most of you have taken your GMAT, and so now you're starting to think about how you actually construct the essay, which is really, in addition to the letters of recommendation, really it's the most critical piece of your application. And unlike the letters of recommendation, this is a piece you've got sole control over. So I want to talk to you a little bit about the types of essays and things you can do to sort of make your essays be punchy, stand out, as well as like show the authenticity that admissions officers are looking for in an era where 50, 60, 70+% of the applicants that apply to these schools are qualified, and yet only 10 to 20% get in. So you'll note that all of you are on mute. It's not because we don't want to hear your shining voices or your great voices. It's really because there's just a lot of feedback. But if you have questions that are timely, feel free to type them. I'll try to get to them within the course of the presentation. Otherwise, rest assured that there will be plenty of time to answer questions or ask questions, which I'll answer on the back end. Okay. So just so you feel a little comfortable with us and know, it feel like we know what we're talking about. I want to talk a little bit about the company right now. So Admit Advantage, essentially we're an admissions consulting company. We help candidates applying to business school, law school, undergrad, and soon-to-be medical school. But for the purpose of this presentation, I want to talk about, obviously, the MBA applicants. We work with people from inception all the way to the end. So people come to us saying, look, I think I want to go to business school. I think I've got an interest in school. I've got no ideas on how to sort of make that happen, to candidates being accepted into multiple programs and having to negotiate financial aid and sort of negotiate the wait list, et cetera, et cetera. So really soup to nuts. Our process has a hallmark of being very structured. Eric and I are the two initial founders. We're former science guys, out of college and actually even professionally, and we really believe that a structured process serves all different kinds of applicants well. Those applicants who work in, companies that are big feeders for business school, or industries that are big feeders for business school, where they need to differentiate between themselves and other applicants. And then those people who are coming from, non-feeder industries who are trying to make that leap as well. It's necessary for them to really thoroughly examine all the different components in their background to launch a strong application. We've been very fortunate to have really top-tier consultants who are alums of all top-tier schools and are also really good people. We've tried to match the professional diversity in different industries like finance and marketing, government and consulting, tech, et cetera. We've tried to match that with the industries that you are all coming from and the industries that you aspire to be part of. So, we've had people like, that literally have started companies. We had a former speechwriter for Joe Biden. We've had professional writers. We've had people who've got PhDs. We have people from the military. So we've got a really cool mix of people. Now, three core tenets underlying our company are experience, focus, and performance, right? So all of us have gone to top-tier schools. We've all been in your position. Most of us have served in admissions in some capacity, either formally admissions or second-year interviewers or alumni interviewers. We're known for being very client-focused, so we kind of think of ourselves as the Zappos of this space. We do consultations all the time. We go to going-away parties. We go to a bunch of graduations. We've been to a couple of overseas weddings. So we try to be close to our candidates, one, because it's fun, and secondly, because it makes our people feel comfortable. And when they're comfortable, they're going to reveal themselves and write about things which are really significant in their own lives and be more compelling candidates. And then performance. All this is a moot point if people are not getting into school. We've been very fortunate that we've had people get into top-tier schools. So, they've been great candidates. We feel like we've had a little bit of impact, but this is a representative slice of the kinds of schools where people have been accepted. Okay, and it's not necessarily all the schools. We see all the big boys and the big girls up here. All right. My name, just a little bit on the founders. I'm Kofi. I'm sort of the less smart partner, unfortunately, although they do tell you want to work with smarter people. Eric and I have very similar backgrounds in some sense. So we both have worked at Accenture. I worked at Net2Phone, which is a voice over IP company, which is sort of like Skype before Skype existed, a little less successful, unfortunately for them, I guess, and for me. Um, After business school, I sold a software company that I had incubated in the Wharton Venture Initiation Program. My background is from Harvard and Wharton. I did my undergraduate degree in neurobiology. I stayed at Harvard and got a master's in education at the Wharton School. I was really fortunate to have a fellowship to go to school there as a Joseph Wharton Fellow. I ran the largest student-run conference, and I also served as a marketing teaching fellow for a first-year core marketing class. Eric Better worked at G Capital. He also sold a software company, actually coming into business school before business school. His undergraduate degree is from Brown. He majored in engineering. At Wharton, he was, graduate with honors, was a TWIGO fellow at a full ride, et cetera. So those are sort of our backgrounds. Our consultants are alums of many different cool organizations. This picture on the left. On the right, you can go to admitadvantage.com/consultants and see how smart the rest of our people really are. So we've been really lucky bringing in really amazing people. Okay, that's it. So you want more on the company, you can look at the website or ask questions on the back end, but let's deep dive into the material. So when we talk to candidates, one of the things that I'm struck by is how often people just look at the essay questions and just start writing. And, they do not focus on the different elements that are really important to you getting into school. So, people just sort of look at the essay questions and start writing, and they're not really thinking about, okay, what are the elements that I want to include within the course of my application? What are the stories, experiences, and accomplishments? What are the critical character traits which I really want to have there? And so what we want you to do initially is to really focus on building your own personal brand. Okay, so think about sort of the 3 to 7, 5 to 10 leadership traits, character traits, stories, etc., which highlight who you are as a candidate and enable an admissions officer who really likes you to essentially advocate for you, right? So if you have a strong analytical, think of things like a strong analytical focus, innovative, persuasive, able to be a great communicator, able to make decisions with information, civically or community minded, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. Try to find those things, and then basically, think of like stories and experiences and accomplishments which highlight those respective elements. Okay. As I was saying, I'm struck by how often people just start writing the essays, start work on the essays. They don't think up front about, okay, what are the things I want to include, not just in my essays, but in the letters of recommendation, the non-essay data portion, my resume, and in my interview, right? There are 5 platforms. There are 5 pieces of the platform that basically comprise your application. Focusing on the essays, you can't just start writing. You have to, it will not be effective because people are reading your essays in totality, and your job as an applicant really is to basically paint a total picture and imagine that you met an admissions officer that likes you. Your job is to put them in the best possible position to advocate for you over someone else. So you've got to stay up front. You've got to think about, okay, what are those stories and experiences and accomplishments that basically, kind of make up my story, and what are the related leadership characteristics and traits? Okay, it's really, really important that you do this up front, even if you're working on a tight time frame. If those of you that are rushing to sort of get stuff out for round 1, you've done 2 schools, trying to make that last deadline, you've really got to do this. Okay, so think about the leadership characteristics that you have that other prominent business leaders or military leaders or government leaders have that you respect. So things like I mentioned here, analytical focus, innovation, being persuasive, and things I mentioned before, like being civically or community minded, being adaptive, being industrious, being very, being a great communicator, able to lead without authority. Think of those characteristics, come up with a set of about a half dozen sort of character traits, and then think of like leadership stories that basically demonstrate those things. So you see here, we've got, if an applicant's trying to express that they're sort of very analytical, innovative, and persuasive, they have to give examples of that, right? So the analytical focus, they wrote about sort of, implementing a rigorous analytical sort of decision-making tool to increase profitability per customer and leading to a percentage increase and margin increase of X, right? Innovation, okay, you can't just say you're innovative. Give me a story about how you're innovative and obviously persuasive. So this is really significant for you to do as an applicant up front. Don't make the trap of just beginning to write, because you'll find that your essays will lack cohesion. You'll probably get lost sort of in your own narrative, okay? The things I want you to focus on beyond what I mentioned is, making sure you're highlighting all the different aspects of your candidacy. So we see a lot of candidates sometimes who just focus only on the professional, okay? So they only want to talk about work and how they got promoted from being an analyst to an associate, or they want to talk about sort of personal. We had a guy that wrote about basically losing 100+ pounds, and I'd like to do that, but that's all he wanted to write about. So you have to have a balance, right, with like the personal, the community, how you made an impact. Now that community can be your neighbor community, it can be your undergrad community, it can be your religious community, it can be even your work community. But highlighting sort of the professional, community, and personal aspects throughout the course of your essays is always a really good thing if you can do it. Okay. I also want you to know what you're going to say in the context of differentiation. Okay, so we get this question all the time. People will sign up for a free consultation and say, okay, how do I differentiate myself? Look at my background, tell me I'm different. The reality is, twofold. One, looking at just your background elements, it's going to be very hard for you to be unique just on the strength of the things sort of in your resume. Okay, what you want to do is really sort of think about sort of being authentic. You want to think about sort of what your passions are. What is your real reason for going to school? Now, obviously, a lot of people go to school to make money. That's totally okay, but you still want to do something, right? So what is it you're passionate about? What is a catalyst that's making you go to school? Especially those of you that are career switchers, the stereotypical technical person who, is working in a big company and then wants to switch over to the business side. What is it that motivated you to do that? Okay. Realize also sort of, secondarily, that you're not competing against everyone. You're competing against people like you. So, you don't have to worry about if you're coming from the Peace Corps, right? You're not competing against an investment banker coming from JP Morgan. You're competing really against other people coming from the nonprofit world. So, you want to sort of fine tune and calibrate and not get so worked up thinking, oh gosh, how do I match up, against this person who's done, years of finance, years of accounting, years of strategy, et cetera, if you're doing something different, right? So that's sort of the other side of differentiation. Don't worry if you're so different and you feel like there's no way you can sort of match up, okay? Realize that the top tier schools, most of you are interested in top 20, 30 schools or higher. Everyone's a good candidate. I mean, I will tell you literally, I do alumni interviews, or I did alumni interviews from Wharton, and they would officially tell us 70% of the people that apply are admissible. 70. That means you take a pool of 20 people, 6 of them have no chance of getting it. Bad GMAT, bad GPA, poor work experience, probably a combination of 2 or 3 of those. That still leaves a set of 14 that are very attractive. So if you took those 14 applicants and showed them to a professor and said, these are the people that are going to be in your class, he or she would say, great. The reality is, of that qualified 14, 2 to 5 are getting in, right? 10 to 25% are getting in. It's sort of the top 20, 30 schools. And as you go higher, it's more so a band of 10 to 17%. All right. So realize you do need to be strong. Make sure that you are, speaking about, you're offering specifics. Okay. So, a lot of people make the mistake when they apply, and it's kind of another tidbit. When they apply to school, they always list all the things you're going to get from the school, right? So they love the school, they always want to go to the school, okay? That's the first mistake they make. Then they say, I want to go to the school because I'm going to get X, Y, and Z from the school. They never think about, okay, really mentioning specific courses and professors they want to study and study under, respectively, organizations they want to be part of, and they don't really necessarily articulate the short-term goal. They say, I'm going to the school so I can get into consulting. Well, consulting is not really for most people, a long-term goal. Think about your goal in the context of what you're looking to do for the first 3 to 7 years after you graduate, and then 7+ years, and break it down, right? And indicate how, you've got a 10-step goal to become the chief marketing officer of a major credit card company. If you got a 10-step goal, business school step 3, and you've already done steps 1 and 2. Okay, so I want you to think about that. I really want you to sort of sell the dream, like think big, and you've got to paint a clear picture. You've got to indicate how what you've done in the past will enable you to sort of move to the future, including getting employment, at a particular type of company or industry. When you apply for a job, or from the school's perspective, it's not like everything you've done prior to business school is thrown out when you apply for a job at the end of your first semester. And Dan's an MBA, he'll tell you that himself. You've got to basically, leverage the things you've done prior to school. Very, very important. And then dream big. Okay. We had a guy that we worked with that wanted to sort of start a coffee company, and I said, you can't, like, in his like a coffee restaurant chain in the city. I said, Starbucks exists, right? You got to go big if you're going to compete and justify taking a spot at a top tier school. They want to see that you're going to build something big. It doesn't have to be a big business; it could be a big nonprofit, but it's got to be substantive. It can't be something that you just, you could take class at a local community college and sort of be well situated. Okay. Also, and I kind of highlighted this before, write an essay outline. All right. So, realize that you've got to sort of leverage the other things I mentioned: letters of recommendation, the non-essay data portion, the uh, the resume. Those 4 things, in addition to your essays, those are the 4 pillars that you submit. And then for most schools, that's it. And then you're granted an interview by invitation only. There are a couple schools which are different. It depends on the time you apply. Schools like Georgetown, schools like Kellogg, where in obviously executive MBA programs are typical to interview most, if not all, the people. But for the most part, you have those 4 pieces of your platform, and you've got to be very judicious with your word count, right? When you see essays that give you options, i.e., answer 2 of the next 3, answer the questions that allow you to sort of best express your brand and kind of and what those specific stories are that you want to express. People always ask us, I've got multiple questions. Am I going to be penalized for not answering a question? No, the reality is, look, there are people that get into a particular school that answer any combination of questions when you're given options. You've got to pick the right questions that kind of match what you're doing. I think those are really wonderful opportunities. I know a lot of times students or prospects agonize over that, saying, they have like analysis paralysis, but from my perspective, more choice is always better than less. And so you will struggle with those kinds of questions if you don't have a plan. But if you have a plan as to what you want to express, again, which is independent of any school's application, if you're coming in saying, these are the 5 to 10 stories, these are the 5 to 10 leadership characteristics, you'll find an essay that kind of matches what you want to include, that allow you to include 1 or 2 stories and 1 or 2 leadership characteristics, and it'll be a beautiful thing, right? If you don't have a plan, it's going to be really tricky for you, okay? Make sure that you're answering, when you have multiple essay, like part 1, 2, 3, and let's say it's a 600-word essay, make sure you give equal time to all 3, right? So we see a lot of times people, they either don't answer all the questions, or they basically, like in that specific example, they'll spend, say, 550 words just kind of answering the first, two parts of the 3-part question. They get to the 3rd part, and they kind of don't answer because they only have 50 words left. You can't do that, okay? You definitely need to make sure that you're thorough. These are the kinds of things that just enable an admissions officer to very easily just put you on the side. And they love doing that because it's so hard to admit people. So don't make it easy to basically disqualify yourself, right? Do your research, okay? There's so much more information on the site. I graduated 10 years ago. I'm like the old guy. I will tell you that there was so much less information when I was applying to school. Now, there's so much there. To be honest with you, I mean, you do want to visit schools if you can, because some schools do ask you that, but there's so much information. You can find clubs, you can find club leaders, you can find courses, you can find, you can watch interviews, you can sort of do virtual tours. Leverage that information because your competitors are, okay? That said, do visit the school and or attend local sessions. If you were in a city like Chicago and Kellogg and DePaul and University of Chicago Booth are on your list and you don't visit the schools, that's a problem, okay? Make sure you're doing that. You need to show interest and passion for the school. Talk to alumni, right? One of the things which I would recommend you do, people always ask, who can I talk to? Reach out to the club leaders. There's always a prospective student liaison at all these clubs. They don't always love getting emails, and they may be kind of slow in the summer because they're working internships, but they will get back to you. Reach out to them, and also consider reaching out to your undergraduate alumni. So, call your undergraduate office, reach out to them and say, look, I want to talk to people that went to Berkeley Business School, that went to my undergraduate school of Colgate, right? They'll help you with that. And they'll put you in touch with those people, and those people have a natural affinity to work with you. So make sure you're doing that. And then be very clear about why each school makes sense. Now, I will be the first to admit that some of this is marketing, right? So, when you watch commercials and you watch a commercial for BMW or for Audi or for Jaguar or for Mercedes, you think they're so dramatically different. The reality is, yeah, they're kind of similar, but they're probably 80% similar, 20% different. You need to basically make sure you're addressing that 20%, okay, when you apply to these schools. Don't make the mistake, though, of saying you're applying to Kellogg because Kellogg is only good in marketing, because they will take offense to that. And the reality is you can't really be a top 20 school and not be good in everything. But there are some things that some schools are better at than others. There are some departments within schools which are stronger than other departments. So make sure that you're clear about that. Make sure, that in terms of that being a fit, make sure you're clear about sort of the location, the size, the teaching style, alumni, be clear about why you want to go to a school beyond the fact that it's, ranked in the top 5 or across, 4 or 5 different ranking mechanisms. Be very clear about why you're passionate about a program. Okay? Let's look at the essay types. Okay, there are always different kinds of types. It's really interesting. So the essay types do go in and out of vogue. And I guess the essays are going in and out of vogue, right? To a certain extent. I mean, you got schools that are reducing their quantity. I think they'll probably go back to adding more essays. That's kind of the inside ball game, which I don't want to get into. But I will say that there are still different types of essays, right? So you've got the story essay, right? Why do you want to get an MBA, and why do you want to get it from my school? This used to be very, very popular. I'd say, 7 to basically 10 years ago. Then it started sort of going out of vogue. You see it cropping up here and there, but this is basically a short and long-term goals question, right? This is, the question that explores why you're a good fit for business school. What about your background makes you a good fit? And even though there's several variations, this is kind of the crux of kind of what they're looking for. In terms of the admin advantage, quote unquote, I think that's kind of clever, probably not. You answer the questions, right? So some schools do want short-term, long-term. Others want, why do you go to school? Some schools want those things, and they want why now. Some schools don't want why now. The worst thing you can do is sort of, answer the wrong questions, especially if you're applying to sort of sister-type schools, right? Because the admissions officers pick up on that. So, people that apply to, say, for example, Columbia often apply to NYU. And we've seen people historically, you can see them. It's very easy to see this. They'll take an NYU essay that's kind of similar to a Columbia essay, and they'll literally just swap out NYU for Columbia and then plop it in there. And schools know that. I mean, they know what other schools, especially neighbor, sister schools, are asking. So make sure that you're basically answering my questions. You don't want to spend too much time in context because there typically is a tight word count, but do provide a little bit of context, a little bit, maybe like a sentence or two for a particular answer. Don't answer things which are outside the scope. I think that's pretty obvious, but it happens. And then basically be school specific, okay? Very important on these kinds of questions. Why business school? Why my school? Why now? Be very specific. I just edited one of our clients' essays, and we had talked about this, but he was writing about why he wanted to go to Columbia. I forget the exact question, and he had about 40 plus words out of a 300-word essay about sort of what Columbia specific was about. And I sent it back to the table. I said, look, you got to retool this. This is the crux of the question. All right. You've got the describe yourself essay, right? This is very typical. Let's say you're running for a club. How would you describe yourself to your peers? It's the first day of class. You're meeting your learning team. How would you describe yourself? Blah, 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 blah. Okay? How would your classmate describe you on graduation? Those kinds of things. It's a classic differentiation question, right? So it's a classic question where people that sometimes are so buttoned up say, well, I worked at Goldman. I did this and this. I managed this project. There's not enough soul, there's not enough introspection in those responses, okay? This is not a take me through your resume question, because they've got your resume, right? So don't forget that. They have your resume already. This is sort of what motivates you, what drives you, how you think you'll make a contribution here, what do you want your impact or legacy to be. These are the kinds of questions that are sort of hidden underneath the describe yourself sort of, prompt, okay? So what we recommend is sort of go back to your brand, right? This is why you build a sort of brand document. Think of sort of the characteristics that you're trying to highlight. Make sure you include them here, because there's no better place to include them than in this kind of essay of describe myself, right? If you're going to highlight your resume, which is okay, speak about the impact, the key impacts on certain things, the key roles. Like this is, again, do not go through line by line your resume, and don't make it look like it's a job description. Talk about, okay, like, yeah, I did, I was a consultant in this role, and basically I helped do the merger. I helped basically do the background research on Trulia and Zillow. They're merging, in case those of you didn't know, but that's the kind of thing like you would be writing about. You sort of deep dive into a little bit of the details, right? If you are someone that basically is reserved and quiet, you have to beat your chest a little bit, okay? If you don't sort of self-promote and sell a little bit, the person next to you will, and you won't get it. And you'll probably be very deserving to get it, but you won't get it. Now, if you're the other person, if you're that person in the room saying, oh my God, there's someone so loud in this room, and you realize it's your own voice, tone it down a little bit, okay? Because no school wants to accept jerks. They've got enough people applying where they can accept really good, smart people, and there's no one that's smart. It's like no one's bigger than the game. There's nobody that's really smart enough applying to like top 20-ish, 30-ish schools that can just get in no matter the personality. Don't be arrogant. If you're wondering who the jerk is, sort of, in your set of friends, you're like, who's that guy that's always talking a lot, or that woman's always talking a lot? If you don't know, it's probably you, okay? So make sure that you sort of tone that down a little bit. Then there's the behavioral question, right? So tell me about a time when. Describe an incident where you failed. Tell us about a time when you had to sort of manage a peer with greater position than you. Those kinds of things, right? So these have become increasingly popular because the business schools are trying to train you for situations where there's no clear answer, and they love these kinds of questions. Okay, so this is typically where you get to choose 2 of the next 5 questions, and this is typically one of those questions, because they don't want to make everyone answer this question, but they really want to see just how you think. Those of you who work in consulting companies with the case interviews, you'll know what I mean, in the sense of, when you do one of those case questions, often they're more so looking at your thought process and your ability to sort of run the numbers and do analysis than the actual real answer, right? You'd be better off sort of having a very logical thought process and explanation of that than just guessing at the right answer and giving them that number. Very similar here, okay? Use a real example. What I will tell you that is, if you're writing a mistake essay, you're writing a weakness essay, a time when a weakness sort of really hurt you, you've got to indicate the lesson learned or lessons learned, and then also hopefully indicate how you applied those lessons previously. Very important, okay? You want to articulate the impact the events had in your life. You need to humanize your application, right? Sometimes people apply to sort of some of these like really competitive schools, and they feel like they need to lose their personality and act in a certain button-up way, and nothing could be further than the truth. Okay? They want people that are dynamic. They want people that want to share and be part of something, be part of a community, especially in business school, where you've got institutionalized happy hours on like Thursdays or Fridays, right? So make sure that you're doing that. And again, choose your essays wisely. Okay, think about your branding message, and don't choose essays because your friends do it, or because someone recommends it. It doesn't fit with what you're trying to express. Then you've got the leadership essay, right? So this is where you really need to highlight the impact and legacy you've left. Okay, this is, again, not a position essay. Like, here are my responsibilities. No one gives a darn about your responsibilities. People want to know what you did, how you impacted, how you made change, how the organization's better after you've been part of it than it was before you got there. Okay, really highlight what you did above beyond the call of duty. So many of you have had jobs where people, especially in the last couple of years, people have gotten fired and you've had to assume responsibility for them, right? Or you got promoted and with someone else, and that other person wasn't as good, and you had to sort of carry their water in addition to yours. So make sure that you're highlighting that. Make sure you're aware of your leadership style. okay, and how it's effective. Now, a lot of you haven't had leadership opportunities. That's okay. Although you probably should have been seeking it outside of work, but you should still have an idea of what your leadership style will be, because we've all been managed. We've all either managed or been managed, and we've all either really enjoyed great bosses or disliked not so great bosses. Okay, so make sure you have some opinions about leadership, and it's fine if you're like a quiet leader, like a I hate using sort of sports analogies or sports metaphors, but like a Tim Duncan type, or if you're a loud rah rah leader. I'm trying to think who's like that these days. Just someone who's sort of, in your face, like Ray Lewis for all your Baltimore Ravens fans. Okay. So try to leverage your recommenders to confirm your leadership. So there's nothing like that kind of corroboration, right? And so this is where you should be talking to your recommender saying, look, I'm going to write about this deal that I drove through that was kind of atypical for an analyst. So I really appreciate if you would sort of happen under your watch, you were managing me. Is it something you potentially can mention also? Do that, okay? Very, very important. And then those of you that work in teams, I can't tell you how often, this is kind of the people that are very modest. You'll read an essay and say, my team did this, we did this, we did this. I don't care what your team did. I want to know what you did, right? So you've got to raise your hand. And some of this is cultural. I will tell you, like, my parents are from Ghana, and there definitely is sort of that team mentality. We don't sort of draw attention to yourself. A lot of Asian countries are like this as well. If you're applying to sort of American/Western business schools, you've got to tweak that a little bit. That sort of frame of reference. Okay. And then you've got sort of the strengths, weaknesses, accomplishments, disappointments essays, right? So again, use real examples. I hate when people say, my weakness is I bite off more than I can chew, or I'm too hard on myself. Like, give real weaknesses, real disappointments, real failures. Those things are so tried and true. If you are in your early 20s and you haven't had any kind of disappointment or failure, you probably haven't been reaching, high enough. At least that's what a lot of schools think. Or you're not being really candid with yourself and being analytical. So you've got to use real stuff. Okay. Again, as I highlighted before, lessons learned and the actions you've taken to address those weaknesses. If you know you have a weakness, it's really incumbent upon you to sort of address it. That's your responsibility, okay? And make sure that basically this is consistent with your brand characteristics and stories. So we had someone how they were sort of like very analytical, they were amazing, and then they wrote about their biggest weakness being getting like a D in like calculus. Now, granted, both those things happened, both those things were true, but they didn't realize that they had to sort of address that in the context of highlighting they were analytical in other places, right? So you want to make sure that you're consistent, your brand's consistent. Okay. And then there's sort of the optional essay, right? So this is the plug essay used to fill gaps, right? So do not write an optional essay if you don't need it. But if you have things like a huge gap in your work experience, if you can't get your boss to give a recommendation because your boss will fire you if she finds out that you're going to business school, if you have sort of just some holes, you graduate college in 6 years as opposed to 4, this is where you sort of write about those experiences, right? And I will not tell you that the optional essay will make all the bad things go away, but definitely can help a lot. And at least it gives you a chance to tell your story in a way that you probably will get a chance to do if you get an interview, but you've got to make sure you get to that interview stage, right? So write and use the optional essay if you need it. Do not do it if you don't need it, and do not go on and on and on. A lot of times optional essays have no word limits, and so we've had people give us like 850 to 1,000 word optional essays. Nobody wants to read that. I don't want to read that, and it's my job, okay? So don't do that. Reapplicants, for most schools, reapplicants basically only have to do an additional essay or 2, right? I do want you to go through and reread your previous application. You don't want to be like a totally new person in the context of last year you wanted to do sort of energy and this year you want to do nonprofit. That doesn't work, right? But you do want to sort of highlight how you've grown. You do want to highlight things like doing more research on the school, getting promoted, taking a class or 2, improving your GMAT score, working on sort of addressing those previously stated deficiencies. Very, very important to show that kind of self-awareness, right? Now, if you're looking at yourself saying, I applied last year and my application kind of looks the same, maybe you shouldn't apply this year, right? So if you didn't get in last year, especially if you didn't get in without an interview, right? So you didn't make the interview cut, and you're looking at the application this year, you're like, I don't think I've changed that much. you probably need to take a year to change and then reapply next year. Okay. We'll get to questions in a minute. Eric always gets mad if I don't go over this. We've got a lot of different support options. Basically, depending if you want to spend a couple $100 or a couple thousand, so you can take a look at our website. There's comprehensive all you can eat. By the way, this is spaced out in 2 increments. There's a streamlined package, which is just sort of essay help and sort of outlining and editing. No resume, no mock interviews, no 3+ essay edits. We've got a final review package where if you write the whole thing on your own and you want some support on the back end, we'll give it to you. And then we've got sort of targeted services where you can get help on a lot of different things. That's all on the website. I'm not going to bore you or bore myself, but we can help you, and we do help a lot of people at this time of the year. Hourly, also, if you want more flexibility. Ding analysis, you applied last year, didn't get in, you're about to reapply. You probably want either us or someone professional or close friend to take a real look at your application and say, how can I make this better? We offer a ding analysis. We'll review it. If you end up buying something else, we'll give you, half the cost in terms of a credit. Half the cost of a ding we'll give you sort of in a credit. So it's actually a pretty good deal. Pre-application, if you are a year plus away from applying, you're an early bird and people hate you. I'm kidding. If you're a year plus away from applying, this is actually good for you because you want to sort of leverage your time well, make sure you're well positioned when you apply. And the same thing, we'll give you, $250 of the $500 cost. We'll give that to you in a credit. All right? So we've got other stuff going on. Non-traditional applicants are doing tomorrow. We've got open office hours next week. Come with questions. We're on Facebook, Twitter, or blog. Our blog's terrible. I got to fix that. Princeton Review we work with. We like them. We think they're other good services, but we like these guys. There's a 15% discount going through our website. And if you want a free consultation and you've not had one, you can go to flexbooker.com/advantage. We are literally just using that. We switched providers because the provider only went out of business. It's a good reason. And or you can reach out to info@admitadvantage.com or call or email me personally with a personal question. Okay, so with that, Dan, let's get some questions in, and hopefully I can make people happy. So just type your questions, and I will read them and basically answer them. Okay. So long question. I feel like who's that guy? Casey Kasem? You guys are probably too young for that. Okay. Anyway, roughly, how much of an essay should be focused on a single personal story to engage the reader and show depth, rather than trying to give broader context and how it applies throughout your life? It seems the more you spread out the breadth, the less impact you can have. It seems like you're just trying to hit various talking points. I would agree with that. I think that specificity gives a certain kind of vitality to your essay that I think you should consider writing. And I usually got multiple essay options. You got multiple essays you're submitting. So yeah, I probably would choose one specific thing, and I try to have that be like, think of like fables. So there's like, it's a very specific story, but they're general life lessons that can be derived from a fable, right? The tortoise and the hare, et cetera, et cetera. So think of your essays like that. Pick specific things which highlight certain leadership characteristics, certain items about you. So I'll give you an example. So we had a guy, it's actually a long example, but I'll shorten it. Basically, we had a guy that worked in a construction company. He bid on some contracts with some other people from other companies. They colluded. They basically said, look, all of us need to get work. So what we'll do is the 4 of us will bid, we'll bid high. 3 of us will bid high on a project. 1 guy will bid low. And then we'll do the same thing on different projects, but we'll just rotate the person bidding low so everyone gets something. Great idea, but illegal. And so he wrote about that like as one of his main core stories, and then we use that to extrapolate, because he basically ended up, really hurting his bonus and hurting financially and taking a risk. We wrote about that, showing his morals, showing his ability to sort of think under pressure, showing his ability to sort of not follow the crowd. So there were general lessons which were really important for a business leader that we were able to derive from that very specific story. Okay, from Andrea. Can you give me an example of how weakness can make you different and stronger from other applicants? I can't, because I don't think it's a weakness that makes you different. It's basically the lessons learned and how you apply them that makes you different, right? So, like, you're not going to look like a better applicant because you got a better weakness, right? So you can only dunk on a 9.5-foot rim as opposed to, an 8.5-foot rim, right? I'm being sort of theoretical. It's really about sort of what you've learned lessons you've learned, and showing that you've learned some lessons, showing that you have the ability to be humble and have some foresight. And then when that situation arose again, you took those lessons and applied them successfully. That's how you basically differentiate yourself in the context of different weaknesses. Okay, next question. Ryan, from Ryan. Is there a different approach needed if applying to a fully employed / part-time program with regard to the essays? Not really. So, the part-time programs, typically you're obviously still working for most of you, and I guess that would also apply to sort of executive MBA programs. I still think that, I would say, that's a good question. I would say not really in terms of the approach should be the same, thinking of the stories, experiences, and accomplishments, critical leadership components. You probably want to emphasize that you've got the ability to sort of multitask if you're going to part-time, that you have the ability to sort of do well on your job, maybe tend to your family in a way that isn't necessary if you're doing a fully immersed 2-year program. If you probably want to highlight the fact that if you're looking to switch careers, that you're already making your own headway doing that as opposed to relying on the school, because the school's career offices are typically geared towards full-time applicants. But I think those are kind of the main areas where I think there's a little bit of differentiation, but the approach, to your question, the approach should actually be the same. Okay. Next. Okay, question. Can I talk about our process when helping applicants with essays? Yeah, I mean, so it depends on kind of what people get from us. You know, some people want, trying to find the slide. Some people want, soup to nuts help, and they want it sort of comprehensively, like up here. Some people want streamlined. Some people want, we offer a lot of different things. I would tell you that there are a couple of things that happen in our company. One, if you were doing sort of a streamlined or comprehensive, we spend a lot of time literally interviewing you, having you fill out documents, reviewing those documents, and those people, there are 2 of us reviewing it, right? So it's your lead and it's your reserve consultant, and we're trying to find threads that we can build your application around. We're trying to find things that jump out, and they're probably things that you will expect to write about. So this is an amazing story, and we'll say that's not going to hold up, right? But here's something you should actually write about that you were kind of just throwing under the carpet. This is a hidden nugget, and we're going to build on it. So spend a lot of time on that, and then basically we'll give you an outline of a particular school, and then basically we'll have you do one essay, which we'll edit, and turn around within 12 hours, and then unless you send it to us, like actually always within 12 hours, and I'll see you. And then basically we'll give it to you, and we'll keep going back and forth on that specific essay, probably 3 to 5 times, if like most candidates, until we agree on what an amazing, sterling essay is, and then we'll kind of turn you loose, right? But our process is really, our consultants don't always like it because we kind of try to dummy-proof it, and we try to make it super thorough. One of the problems, and we're all like this, when you're a smart person, if you can cut corners. And we don't want our clients having corners cut, and we've done this so many times that we kind of understand the issues with doing that. So it's exceptionally thorough. If you want something where it's going to be hands-off, we're just going to say, hey, write something and send it to us, we'll take a look, we'll get back to you whenever. We're not the company for you. If you want a lot of structure, you want people being very nitpicky, which I think you probably should have, then we're a good fit in that sense, okay? But look at the website, and if you have a question, Ryan, reach out to me. But it really depends on kind of what you're looking for in terms of the process. If you're just getting a single essay edit, that's something different than buying an hour and having us edit something for 20 minutes. That's different than getting either a final review or a streamlined or comprehensive package where we're doing more outlining up front. We're less reactive and more proactive to shaping your story and your narrative. Okay? All right, question. So what kind of topic questions should we ask? That's a little word. What kind of topic or question should we ask when we meet up with alumni admissions officers in order for them to remember me or have a good impression? That's an interesting question. You know what? Here's the reality, and I appreciate this question. There's nothing worse than somebody asking a question that's obviously convoluted because they're trying to impress an admissions officer. There's also nothing worse than going to one of these tours or fairs and somebody basically trying to have a 10-minute conversation with an admissions officer while there are 6 to 10 people behind them. What I would say is this: when you go to these events, your goal is to basically get their business card and follow up. 80+% of people will never follow up with them. I don't know why that's the case. People just don't follow up. Okay, you're trying to build a relationship. You're not really going to be able to be memorable to them in a positive way just in one question. You can't be memorable for being obnoxious, and I've heard from the horse's mouth about that. But you're really just sort of trying to build a relationship, and the questions you ask should be related to your career and your own focus, but not things you could find on the website, right? So there should be questions that are either generally topical, things like, have you seen like people's job interests change with the economy sort of, changing the last 5 to 6 years, right? Or, questions related specifically to sort of your industry, your folks. But again, the answers cannot be online, but you're trying to build a relationship. You're trying to email them every 2 to 3 months. You're trying to say, hey, look, I'm going to be on campus. Can I pop in and talk to you? Such that Nirvana is, when you apply, you can send them a note saying, hey, Jim, I actually dropped my application today. Just want to thank you for all the time in the last 6 months. I'm really looking forward to the possibility of being part of your class. And they respond back and say, oh, great. Yeah, I'm definitely looking forward. Thanks for the email. Excited to read what you've written. That's kind of all you can ask for. Okay. That's what you're driving towards. You're not going to get in because they feel like you've asked an amazing question, like, I don't know, like Wolf Blitzer or something, or Christina Lepore. And they're going to say, this person's so smart, that question was so witty, we're going to let them in. It doesn't work like that. And most of the time, and I've seen it firsthand, being at these tours, I've seen how people come and ask those questions. I can literally see that. I actually have seen an admissions officer kind of mark someone's resume and be like, okay, I want to remember this person for the wrong reason. Okay. Should the voice of your essay change based on the school you're applying to? If so, how? I would say no. I think generally you want to be authentic. I think you want to tweak it a little bit in the sense of highlighting what the school's good for. So if you're applying to Wharton, and you're basically saying, you're really interested in the school because the school, you kind of don't really believe in the rampant use of data in business, and you believe more sort of holistic, instinctive feel for making decisions, that's going to be an issue. But if you sort of had similar language to that, you talked about sort of more general management stuff, say applying to like Kellogg, that would be okay. If you're like, look, I'm applying to school because, I really appreciate that, and I already have the analytics. I'm not looking for a quantitatively, analytical and or rigorous school. I want someplace where it's more big picture, more sort of overall strategy, more sort of holistic. You can write that for Kellogg, right? So that's where you sort of want to tweak a little bit, but I do not think you should sort of be a different person, when you're applying to different schools. Am I that good? Do you guys want me to start talking about Ohio State and how we're going to win the national championship this year? That was a joke. Although it's not really a joke. We probably are going to win it this year. Okay. Well, if there are no more questions, I do want to thank you all for your time. Dan, thank you for organizing. I do want to thank Beat the GMAT, a great partner. I want to thank all of you. I know that there's some of you that are overseas. I think I saw some Indian names. I know it's getting late out there and in Europe, and obviously in the States. So those are hiding at your table, trying to make sure your boss doesn't see you're listening to a business school webinar. So thanks for the time. If you are interested in a free consultation, go to flexbroker.com/midadvantage. You can sign up with either Eric or me, or email us directly or call us. Okay. Oh, one more question. Okay. I knew this always happens. So it's like an auction. Okay. So that's how you can get in touch with us. Let me answer this last question. All right. What do they look for? What do admissions committee members look for in application essays, particularly in South Asian candidates? Since South Asian candidates don't have great writing skills. Wow, that's a stereotype. Is the idea more important or the organization the idea more important? I would say that the organization of the idea is more important. So you're not applying to the School of English, right? You're not looking to become the next Dostoevsky or Hemingway. The idea is more important, especially those who are applying where English is a second language. Like, my Chinese writing skills are not what they used to be. That was a joke too. But they are looking particularly for the ideas. I'd be wary of saying, by the way, and I don't mean this in a slander type, but I mean it in sort of setting your own expectations. I'd be very wary of believing that the other applicants from South Asia, if you were South Asian, are not going to be writing well. Therefore, you're not going to have to worry about that. You do need to worry about that some. You do need to make sure you're grammatical, you've got sort of good structure, because your peers will definitely be writing well. And it's, in fact, it's interesting. I think actually a lot of the scientists and engineers, their ability to sort of, they write white papers, they're very clear, they're very lucid. I think that a lot of them are actually very good essay writers, supposed to be like give you a lot of fluff, who are sort of English or history majors sometimes. Okay. Question: what adcoms look for from applicants from Africa? Well, I am from Ghana, Ghanaian American. I wouldn't say it's any different. I would say that they want intellectual horsepower. I think some of the challenges working in the continent, as it's called, sometimes there's less structure, particular jobs. Sometimes, you're sort of fighting through. That's why my sister lives in Lagos, which I talk about this all the time, like loss of power and graft and just general issues like that. I do think, though, that a lot of American admissions officers feel like, you know what, those things exist, but there's also outsized opportunity. So we have seen, I'll say personally, we've seen candidates applying from some African countries, and obviously Morocco is a lot different. South Africa is different than Kenya, different than Nigeria. So, I don't want to be sort of stereotypical, but we have seen some candidates who have done some pretty amazing things that they didn't have the opportunity, they wouldn't have had the opportunity to do here. Building businesses, building lines of businesses, meeting with certain people. That is sometimes what you get from your competitors who are applying from Africa. They just have they've got more access, but they have to do with less infrastructure. You know what I mean? So they can't just get stuff done immediately, but they've got the opportunity to get stuff done they, uh, because they're just in a place where there is that less infrastructure, and there's more sort of flat. It's more of a flat country to country in Africa. All right. Okay, you guys are flowing. All right, I'll take them. What makes a good leadership story for someone without direct supervisor experience? I would say probably a couple things. One, um, managing a task, leading a task, as opposed to subordinates. So often that can be much more difficult when you've got to get something done and you've got to leverage shared resources. So I think writing about that and how you sort of motivate people to actually work on your project or your deal versus other projects or other deals when you're not actually formally supervising them, you can't reprimand them, you can't force them to do that. That can be very positive in terms of good story. And I also think things outside of your job. So this is where we see people who are volunteering, people who are big brother, big sister, people who are involved in startups, um, you know, people who are athletes, people who start leagues. Those kinds of things offer, outside of the work activities, offer great opportunities for leadership. Okay, so I think both those instances could be things that you could use. All right, question. How much time do I think a candidate needs for writing essays? As I'm planning to give the GMAT in November first week, so should I just focus on the GMAT first and then my essays? Well, that's a tough question. So let me answer the first question. So the first question is, I think typically you want to leave about 3 weeks for your first application, and probably about two and a half, probably 3 to 4 weeks for your first application, probably 2 to 3.25 weeks for every school after that. All right. In terms of your GMAT, I mean, if you are someone that needs, it's late July, right? So you've got July to August, August, September, October, November. You've got basically 4 months. I think that's a long time to prepare for your GMAT. I got to be honest with you. And so I do think you're in a place in July where you should do these things sequentially. I do think, as opposed to simultaneously, you're not in a place where if it's mid to late November, you haven't taken your GMAT and you're trying to apply for round two. You have to do both your GMAT prep and your application work at the same time. You're not in that place right now, especially because you don't need to apply round one. So what I would probably do, if you can, is maybe push forward that GMAT exam maybe by a couple weeks or even maybe a month, and then basically give yourself time in mid to late October to then begin working on your applications. You really should have no problem getting out 3 to 5. Um, Anything else? Any more questions? Okay. I think, Dan, I think you're right. I think this is for real this time. So thanks again for the time, guys. All I ask is that if you do want a conversation, reach out. But I do ask that you pray for my Ohio State Buckeyes. Okay, we need to win this year. So that's all I ask. And I hope you guys have a great rest of the week. And I hope you guys had a little bit of a good time. All right.